Welcome everyone to Marvel Hub. This is DK Dynamite, and we took a little bit of an extended break here on the channel as we balanced some other work with Uni and our main channels, but we are back, and the news broke this morning that Spider-Man will remain in the MCU for at least 2 more films, one of them being Spider-Man 3 and the other one being an unannounced Marvel Studios project. So we have a couple of announcements and actual statements from both Sony and Disney we want to go over here today. So the first one here says, Sony Pictures Entertainment and the Walt Disney Studios announce 3rd film in Spider-Man Homecoming series and will be produced by Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige. The film itself is dated for release on July 16th, 2021. So that aligns perfectly with the theories we made here on the channel that they probably want to get out a solo Spider-Man movie every other year while Tom Holland's in his prime. Even though Tom Holland said that he wants to play the character until his legs break, I do think they want to keep him in his prime when it comes to these solo Spidey movies. So hopefully, right, they can get out maybe 2 or 3 trilogies, maybe even more than that, with Tom Holland's portrayal of the character before they ever pass the torch onto Miles Morales or do some other SpiderVerse stuff. I think when it comes to the MCU, you know, Tom Holland's capable of doing at least, at minimum, 3 different trilogies. You have a high school one, a college one, and a, adult one. I cannot wait to see what they do with that, but I believe that plan works best. So they also confirmed here Spider-Man to appear in future Marvel Studios film. People are speculating that could be Avengers 5, which is a good theory. They could do Secret Invasion, Secret Wars, Dark Avengers. They could do a lot of different things with the future of the MCU at least, but we do know for a fact that Phase 4 is taking a little bit of a break with these big crossovers, massive build-ups, crazy villains. Phase 4 is kind of going back to the roots of the MCU, establishing some new characters, doing a bunch of solo films, and then doing a couple of big events towards the end. We're going to have Doctor Strange 2, Madness of the Multiverse, Thor 4. Those are going to be crazy big films, but that's towards the end of Phase 4. But for a majority of the phase, we have a lot of Disney Plus projects as well, kind of focusing on some other minor characters. Then we have some fun ones like Captain America and the Winter Soldier, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We have Hawkeye, some other minor ones in there, but I think it won't be until around Phase 5 till we start seeing some big events again, some build-ups for some new villains, and a bunch more crossovers, because obviously Phase 5 is going to be when you start getting into the juicy parts of all those Fox assets, where you get X-Men, Fantastic Four, all that great stuff. But I think today confirms that whatever that bullshit Sony was trying to tweet out not too long ago about how Kevin Feige is too busy with his Fox assets and doesn't have time for IPs he doesn't own, that is absolute horseshit. Kevin Feige was confirmed to start developing, I think, a new project for Star Wars over with Lucasfilms. So that proves right there, Kevin Feige is never too busy. He can not only, bring the MCU to the forefront of, cinema all over the world, but he can also then produce a Star Wars film as well. And obviously can continue working with Spider-Man and making that deal work over with Sony. So he went ahead and said, I am thrilled that Spidey's journey in the MCU will continue, and I and all of us at Marvel Studios are very excited that we get to keep working on it. Spider-Man is a powerful icon and hero whose story crosses all ages and audiences around the globe. He also happens to be the only hero with the superpower to cross cinematic universes. So as Sony continues to develop their own SpiderVerse, you never know what surprises the future might hold. We'll talk about that in a second, because that's a very distinct statement about something that's very possible now. But Amy Pascal then said, this is terrific. Peter Parker's story took a dramatic turn in Far From Home, and I could not be happier. We will all be working together as we see where his journey goes. So yeah, that was a big cliffhanger at the end of Far From Home, and there's no way Sony could have somehow creatively wrote a continuation of that cliffhanger without tying him into the MCU. There's just no way. You have Happy Hogan, you have Tony's death really impacting him, you have other characters that appeared that, again, would make Spider-Man 3 so dull and so dry if they had to write it, outside of the MCU. It just wouldn't have made sense. But we then have Sony Pictures CCO Robert Lawson saying, we have had a great collaboration over the last 4 years, and our mutual desire to continue was equal to that of many fans. We are delighted to be moving forward together. So I think after Sony tweeted out about how they would write it on their own, they had everything they needed from Kevin Feige to continue it by themselves, I think after all of that bullshit and all that damage control, Sony knew for a fact there was no way they could have somehow creatively wrote more Spider-Man films featuring Tom Holland and somehow disconnected that from the MCU, and on top of that, having the fans be okay with it. There was no way they would ever find a balance to that, and as I said before, there is no point in taking him out of the MCU after this point. It's been, 2 solo films and other appearances in Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. He's been in 5 movies now. He's already broke the record as appearing as Spider-Man in live-action films more than anybody else. Tom Holland's already broken that record. Why take him out now? Now of all times, you could have put him in at Civil War and maybe Infinity War and Endgame, but the fact that you did Homecoming and Far From Home as well, it doesn't make sense. There's no way you can write him out now. It's way too late, and I think having to write him in just a Sony exclusive universe would kind of break all continuity here. You would essentially be rebooting the character with no ties to the MCU, because even his suit is tied to the MCU. So how do you explain all these things in a Sony-led universe? It just wouldn't make sense. But it's also funny that just yesterday it was announced that Sony will be developing a, what is her name, Madam Web movie as a part of their slate of Sony Spider-Man universe films, and there's a bunch of other films in development over at Sony which are probably never going to happen, but at the very least we know Morbius and Venom 2 are definitely going to happen, but the other ones in development are Nightwatch, Kraven the Hunter, Black Cat, Silver Sable, The Sinister Six, and some other projects as well, probably related to SpiderVerse, some sequels and spin-offs to that. But here's what I really wanted to get into here. Kevin Feige said that Spidey has the power to cross cinematic universes, so what I believe is going to happen now is something that was supposed to happen with the first Venom but got canceled because of Marvel Studios. There was apparently going to be a cameo by Tom Holland himself just as Peter Parker, not Spider-Man, in the first Venom movie, but I think after Marvel and Disney saw that, they were like, you know what, you gotta scrap that out. That just doesn't fit our narrative with the MCU right now, just scrap it out. So, with that being said, I think they're gonna actually try to do that now with Venom 2, and if that's the case, they can easily use the newly established multiverse thread with the MCU to explain how Venom can then join Disney's Marvel universe and could essentially, have a crossover between both Sony and Marvel's universe. So I think, as I've said before, whatever Sony projects come out, right, it could be Morbius, it could be Black Cat, Silver Sable, they could exist all in the same universe as Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but they just won't reference the MCU directly. It would only be the solo Spider-Man movies where the MCU is referenced. So it's a bit of a weird deal here, but I think, as we know, Spider-Man 3 and 4 or Spider-Man 3 and Avengers 5, whatever those films are, they will be massively successful. So I think at any point after that, and if Sony can't get their shit together with their own universe, I'm almost positive what they'll do is say, you know what, we'll keep doing Spider-Verse, you guys handle all the live action projects, you guys take all these characters back. They might end up doing it if they can't find a way to balance Tom Holland being in both the MCU and Sony's cinematic universe here. I think that's what's probably going to happen here, but I'm not against Spider-Verse at all. The film itself was pretty cool. I could definitely see dozens and dozens of sequels and spin-offs, but I think when it comes to live action adaptations, it might be a while before you can accomplish something like Spider-Verse on the big screen. It might take a couple of films or two within the MCU to really establish how that would all work, and it would probably have to fit the narrative of the MCU before Spider-Man starts jumping between multiverses and stuff. So that's a possibility in the future, but I do think that planned cameo for the first Venom, where I believe what it was Peter Parker going on a field trip and seeing the lab where Eddie Brock was at investigating, I think something like that could definitely happen in the second Venom. Obviously, we're going to have Carnage in there, so I'm not opposed to crossing over Tom Holland Spider-Man with the Venom universe, as long as they kind of explain how it's part of a grand multiverse, then I'm okay with that. But I think going forward, we definitely eventually want to see Spider-Man facing Venom and Carnage in the MCU. So I think Kevin Feige's words were pretty distinct there with saying that, yeah, I think Spider-Man is probably one of the only characters ever that'll cross over between studios, but hopefully, the writers over at Sony also acknowledge what the MCU is doing so it doesn't break continuity with Tom Holland's portrayal of the character. But overall, this is phenomenal news. I'm extremely excited and happy to hear that we won't have to see some dry Spider-Man 3 or 4 where they're somehow trying to creatively write it in a direction which literally ignores everything Peter's been through so far in the MCU, because that's the only place he's ever been. He's only been in the MCU, so having to ignore all of that and then going into a cliffhanger about how his identity was exposed, that would be a bit too much. So at the very least, if they ever take Spider-Man back, we at least get one more solo film where we get continuation of that big cliffhanger from Far From Home, and we can see where it goes from there. But he's also going to appear in a future Marvel project. Could be Avengers 5, could also be a Spider-Man 4, but they don't have a release date for that yet. We'll just have to wait and see, but they might end up just releasing the next slate of trilogies for Tom Holland's character after Spider-Man 3 is successful, probably another billion-dollar movie right there at the box office. But that's about it. This has been DK Dynamite. Check all links down below in the description. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn notifications on to stay up to date with the latest and greatest Marvel news and information, and peace out, everyone.